Hello and welcome back to the RPG Limit Breaks podcast. I'm Ghoul02 and I'm here today with Netara as my co-host. Netara, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing great. So we have an awesome show for y'all today. We have my good friend Zic3, hero of all Final Fantasy Pixel remasters and future GDQ runner. Zic, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty good. A little tired, but having a nice chill weekend. I'm ready to talk about some Final Fantasy.
Should we get right into it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, why Final Fantasy? What got you into the Pixel remaster specifically? You know, let's start with your history of like the series and everything else. You know,
oh gosh,
what was your first Final Fantasy? We'll go with that first.
Good question.
To my memory, it is Final Fantasy VII.
Respectable.
When I was very young. 9 would be probably my second, and that became my favorite over time. And yeah, just I remember playing a lot of the PS1 ones, 7, 8, 9 with my best friend growing up, and then it kind of just grew from there. I can remember, it's just some of them are so vivid in my mind. Like I can remember going to the mall with my mom to like pre-order Final Fantasy 12 with like the steel book and the collector's edition guide. And so yeah, it's a series that's always been very near and dear to my heart. And they announced the Pixel remasters, and it's a very easy beginner friendly way to get into some of the more retro Final Fantasies. Sometimes some of the older ones can be a little daunting to get into, and all the versions that are out there, and the Pixel remasters make that a little easier.
It definitely helps with like the accessibility, if nothing else. I remember always saying for a long time that like for a lot of them, it was kind of hard to even find a definitive edition for a game like FF6. Like, do you play like the SNES version where like the translation stuff doesn't match up with modern Final Fantasy?
Yeah.
Do you play like the Game Boy Advance version and then like have to find a mod to make the music not be on the Game Boy Advance sound chip? Do you play like the PC version that was out at the time, which was like the version mobile that like nobody liked?
No.
FF9 or FF6 in particular had that issue, and like the Pixel Remaster made a lot of that a lot easier for like the accessibility of that type of stuff. FF4 is another one that like every version of FF4 is completely different. I'm sure you know probably more about this than I do. Where like the original US version like kind of was almost like an easy mode version of the original Japanese. Then you have the Game Boy Advance port, the 3D, and then.
The 3D version was just so hard that no one could beat it.
Complete collection as well, where it's like, all these different versions of the game, and kind of having like a nice version to coalesce around is definitely, a nice little feeling for sure. Obviously, you know quite a bit about the 4 remaster, having done a run of that at SGDQ. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. As Ghoul mentioned, I did Final Fantasy 4 at SGDQ last year, and it was really cool. It was very stressful for me because like the one thing I wish they would have changed, but they didn't, is there's still no save before Zeromus.
Yep. So
like it was just in my head all week. I was like, if I die on Zeromus, I'm losing like 8 to 10 minutes. I need to get this first try. But the run went fantastic, and like I said, the Pixel Remaster is just a really great version of the game, and they're very beginner friendly and forgiving because they added some quality of life features like the autosave. So it's a little less punishing, except that there's no autosave before Zeromus. I don't know why.
That crystal walk down all of those floors to get back to Zeromus from the like save room next to the ribbon. Yeah, that is such a long walk.
Sorry, you have some experience with this, I'm guessing, with some of those free enterprise?
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never. I was gonna say, even from running like No 64 from the Super Nintendo version of the speedrun, you mess up at Zeromus, which is a very punishing fight. In that version, it's a fun walk. Nobody likes it. The enemies are mean, and you can't turn them off, and there's no save. That is such a mean walk. But speaking of like, sorry, go ahead.
I don't know what it is with like FF4, but like random encounters in FF4 are so brutal compared to a lot of Final Fantasies as well. I remember like even casually playing through it. Like I was like, every single random encounter in this game feels like a freaking boss fight right now. Like I can kill bosses easier than I can kill some of these random encounters.
And in that like crystal area where you're walking through down to Zeromus, they actually are all boss fights.
You get,
so
like,
it's even
behemoths
worse. Yeah, exactly. Now talking about pixel remasters and like the original retro versions and such, for 1 and 6, was playing the pixel remaster your first time playing any of those games, or what were like the first versions of some of those games you'd played before?
Yeah, of course. Well, so in terms of the pixel remasters, 2 was one that I played for the first time on the pixel remasters. 3, I played the 3D version we got, but it was the first time I got to play a true 2D version of Final Fantasy 3.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 is such a strange game to talk about in that regard anyway, between how different the 3D version is versus, the original NES version. They're practically different games with the same story.
Yeah, it's weird. I do wish they had kept, I get they wanted to keep things close to the originals. I do wish they had kept, what they did with the 3Ds and having, Lunith, Ingus, Refia, and Arc instead
that
of
was pretty cool.
4 random dudes, but
yeah.
But yeah, the other ones I've played, 4, 5, 6. I had the Game Boy Advance versions growing up that I played. FF4, actually, my first playthrough was on the PS1 release, which later in life I realized that anything Square ported to the PS1 in that era was garbage.
I do have to kind of say, go in there a bit, because that was one of their only ones that was actually pretty okay, because it wasn't a straight port. They had to retranslate. They, because they had cut everything out, they actually couldn't just emulate it. They actually had to fix it and properly do it. So you're right, all the PS, the kind of ports and remakes, as it were so bad. But that was the best of them, because where they had to kind of redo it, it actually read memory correctly and wasn't nearly so slow. So for a while before the PSP version came out, that was my favorite version, was the PS1 version.
I mean, my first experience with FF6, which is still to this day one of my favorite games, was the PS1 version of that game, which I did not realize at the time just how bad those loading screens actually were, and how often they show up.
God,
yeah, my first playthrough of Chrono Trigger was the PS1 version, and it wasn't until years later where I was like, oh, the game's not supposed to lag for 5 to 10 seconds every battle? I was like, I had no idea.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah, I grew up with the Super Nintendo version. I had a weird happenstance where I got to basically adopt my friend's copy for 10 months while she was in Japan while we were in high school. So I had for 10 months a Super Nintendo copy of myself, and playing the PS1 version of Chrono Trigger. Oh god,
painful.
It was so bad.
But yeah, speaking of FF4, just to kind of, I'm kind of just going back on the history of pixel remasters is many people who have been watching speedruns of the game or whatnot, or even just Final Fantasy speedruns, will probably know the infamous pixel remaster patches of last year.
Yeah, I heard about this actually.
Yeah, so I did Final Fantasy 4 as part of the FF Relay last year, which was really cool and really fun, except for the fact that 2 or 3 weeks before the Relay, Square decided to patch all of the remasters. And for FF4, it was that they wanted to, as they said, they wanted to align the difficulty to be as similar to the original as possible. I don't know why they didn't launch it like that, but whatever. So they increased enemy encounters enemy speed by a ton. They lowered experience values by a ton.
Oh yeah, didn't that make Zeromus much harder? I remember because RPG Chick also runs FF4 Pixel Remaster. I remember y'all talking about how do we kill Zeromus now.
Yeah, and basically to put it, Zeromus is actually perfect. That's the best way to describe it. Is in the current route of FF4 Pixel Remaster, we pick up 3 spider silks along the way in the game to throw at Zeromus to stack slows on him, and after 3 spider silks, he's still faster than he was vanilla on the old patch. He's that much faster. It's wild. So it kind of became okay, I don't know if we'll hit the estimate. Can we finish the game for the Relay? It was a wild scramble of trying to find strats to get to the end.
It's such a weird story too. You would think it would be the first time that like a patch came out and all of a sudden there's a scramble to figure out how does this actually affect the speedrun. Because I even went through that with Stranger of Paradise at Limit Break, where literally the first DLC came out for Stranger of Paradise like a month before the run. I had to double check, like, okay, did they patch? Does poison still work the same way in this version? Turns out they actually buffed it. It was totally okay, but no, I mean, you wouldn't think, like, for a game like Final Fantasy IV, I mean, how old is the game at this point? Like, for the very first version, we're probably talking over 25 years at this point.
Oh yeah.
They're patching a new version of this to be harder out of nowhere,
right?
Especially for a game that's gone through so many iterations. We talk about how like the SNES version was almost like an easy mode of the original, and then like the DS version is like notoriously difficult and all over the place. How like completely wild the difficulty spread is for FF4 in particular. I know that like Complete Collection is considered like a relatively easy version, even though a lot of people like adore that version of the game because like it's got really nice sprite work, and it kind of has everything if you did want to play After Years for whatever reason, and
listen, how dare you, first off. After Years I was buying that as every episode came out, and it was great until you had to go to the moon, and then you were like, why would you spike the difficulty so much?
Here's a better way. It has the interlude between 4 and After Years, which I don't think anybody has any positive thoughts towards.
Oh, that was it was short. That's the most positive thing I can say about it.
Because After Years does have some great character designs and stuff. I know that from the card game. But,
and a couple of the stories were really good, and the rest were, well, they existed.
Yeah.
It was cool to at least see like Square revisits like older Final Fantasies like that. They hadn't done that, basically ever, and that was one of their first like kind of revisits of an older game, which was very exciting. So I definitely would not complain about that. But
I'm definitely glad they tried it.
So you run in the Pixel Remasters, you speedrun FF4, obviously. You're speedrunning Final Fantasy V now at AGDQ. Do you want to give us a primer on what Final Fantasy V speedrunning is like? What makes it different from the other Final Fantasies you run?
Yeah, sure. Final Fantasy V it can be a very unforgiving game, but it's also one of the most unique because of how customizable the job system is. It makes so many like fights in that. I mean, you barely, you're going into the final boss with party members that have like 300 HP. Like levels mean almost nothing. You're just trying to get your job level.
So that hasn't changed from the Super Nintendo run, because I know in that version it's similar. You're going and you're like, how are they going to survive?
Yeah, the only things, I'm not super familiar with how the differences between like the original versus the Pixel Remasters. The only things I think I know is like you can't do as much with like I think using like old on X-Death and stuff like that.
That's sad.
That was another one that actually when it released there was a way to skip the Califisteri fight in the Void, and that was something they patched like week 1 of FF5 being out.
Think of the speedrunners.
But yeah, so yeah, I'm going to be doing that for AGDQ next month. It's going to be the finale run for AGDQ. It is going to be the cutscene remover mod. There is a cutscene remover mod out there for Final Fantasy V because, as we always joke about, B-Dude one day doing a run timed it, and FF5 Pixel Remaster is a like 3-hour 45-minute run with 1 hour and 55 minutes of cutscene.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot.
It is half the game.
Not even the worst I've seen, but definitely not ideal, probably.
Yeah, and especially for like something you're trying to do fast, having that much of the run be cutscenes, that's something.
Yeah, that's a lot of stop and go for sure. So what jobs do you use in the run? Like,
Your main backbones are Samurai for Zeninage to pay to win the entire game, and Chemist because I think any Final Fantasy that has the mix command, it just destroys the game. We know Riku from FF10, it just mix always seems to break a Final Fantasy.
Oh, I'm glad it still breaks 5.
Yep.
Interesting. So like actually, how many games even have Chemist as a job? It's like one of the weird things about like Final Fantasy like 5 and even like the tactics is like there's so many jobs that like just show up in those games and don't show up elsewhere. So I'm like trying to think like how many games even have Chemist as a job. I think it's just like 5 and I think Tactics. I'm not even sure if it's even in Tactics Advanced now that I think about it, but
I'm not sure about Advance.
Yeah, I haven't played the
10 and then-
advances. Yeah.
Yeah.
but yeah,
But yeah,
I say the
I was
cutscene
just
remover mod is very funny considering that is about half the game. I think like 10 has more, like a higher percentage, but not by much.
probably. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has I was going to say it has only the one character, but actually with the sphere grid, that never mind, I take it back. Everyone can have it.
Everyone can have mix. But yeah, so you really get to utilize a lot of the job system, which leads, especially in the end game, leads to some really cool strategies.
Yeah,
So
like what sort of strategies do you use?
Yeah, so a lot of the bosses, like between when you get to the Void and Twintania, your main strategies is like, so you'll have your 4 party members, you'll have Bartz as a samurai, you'll have Lena as a knight, Kryl as a knight, and you'll have Ferris as a bard. And so what you end up doing is you end up having the knights. Everyone's in critical HP except like Lena. So she can use guard because guard just covers every physical attack and makes it 0. So now everybody's clear for physical attacks.
Oh my
So
god.
then you have your one mix up, I believe it's like Maiden's Kiss Holy Water to put Berserk on the boss. So now he can only use physical attacks. So now you're just never going to get hit again. And then you end up mixing a Dragon Fang and I believe Holy Water onto the boss, which turns the boss into a dragon. So now every endgame boss is a dragon. And then you use Ferris as a bard with the Apollo's Harp. The Apollo's Harp does like 8 times damage to dragons. So then you just throw Berserk on Ferris, and then you just let it run.
Oh, wow.
And just every endgame boss just can't do anything because it's a dragon that can only use physical attacks.
Speaking of endgame bosses, I hear rumors there might be a special incentive for your run.
Yes. So after the game got accepted for GDQ and set as the finale, the games committee reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, like, since it's the finale, we'd like one incentive to push for, because right now there's just a naming incentive, which I'll start shilling as we get closer to the event to name Bart's Chadley." But yeah, they were like, "We want one more incentive. Can you is there like a super boss like Shinryu or Omega you can kill?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'll look into it." So there will be an incentive to kill Omega in the run, which has its own it's kind of similar to the strategist outlined, but the one of the things about Omega is that he has reflect innate. So we need to and the Apollo's Harp Dragon thing, harp damage in FF5 is counted as magical damage, not physical damage. So I'm going to have the Detour next Death's Castle to fight the optional fight Carbuncle and steal a Reflect Ring off of Carbuncle, then throw money at Carbuncle until he dies, and then make up that money. And then using the Reflect Ring, you do a very similar strategy to what I just outlined, except you have Ferris attacking Lena, who has the Reflect Ring on, so you can bounce the magic harp damage back at Omega.
Oh my gosh.
The classic Final Fantasy thing of, I can't hit you with magic, but I can hit my teammate with magic who has Reflect that's going to put it on you.
And I can bounce it onto you. That is very Final Fantasy.
Final Fantasy strats like this are just so wild. I've always loved hearing about the ways you can cheese what's the name of it? The tower in 6 where it's you can only use magic or something like that.
The Tower Fanatic. Fanatic's Tower.
Yeah, it's there's so many things you can do to the boss on the top floor that just ruin it. Where it's you guys run out of MP so it never attacks you. All kinds of hilarious strats like that. It's so fun to hear about. And sounds like FF5 has similar levels of just pure shenanigans, which is always fantastic. So
and one of the neat things about one of the neat things about all the Pixel remasters is that one of the features they added to the games was auto battle. And while I know auto battle scary, it sounds like you just push a button and win the game, but the auto battle feature in that game really makes things pretty cool, in that auto battle basically will repeat your last action for you, whatever character. If I set Bartz to attack, auto battle, he'll just keep attacking. And it also speeds up the game a little bit, like, I don't know, like 1.2 times. It doesn't have to wait on anybody. So in some of the fights, it ends up being like you do all your setup stuff, get things ready, and then auto battle and let your kind of strat setup run. It kind of takes the more tedious pieces out of the run of like, I don't have to keep hitting attack. It'll just attack. It's not so much a press square to win feature as much as it just kind of is a nice quality of life and takes some of the tedium out of things. And it makes some of the strats pretty cool to set up for auto battle strats.
Right, because obviously if it's running faster, it's probably going to be better off, getting into a position where auto battle wins the fight rather than having to continuously manually do the inputs for everything the whole time. So
yeah, and there's things auto battle won't do, like the strat I just mentioned about Omega. If you queue attack on a team member, auto battle won't do that for. It'll put the enemy as the primary target, so you have to manually do weird stuff like. If you heal the boss, it won't repeat that. Like, it doesn't do things that are, like, not obvious.
How dare you, Square? How could you do that?
How do the menus in the Pixel Remasters feel? I remember, like, it's always kind of an interesting thing, especially when a new version of a game comes out. The menuing, especially in an RPG, it's so important that the menus feel nice and crisp and smooth. Is it a pretty solid set of menus? Like, do you feel pretty good moving around and making decisions in the game? Does it eat inputs all the time and you're constantly arguing, why Square?
So this actually brings up an interesting topic in that my answer to your question is, on the PC version, they're okay. On the console version, they're amazing. So the
Which
Pixel
console?
Remasters, PS5.
Oh, PS5. Got it.
Yeah, well, so yeah, in the past year, the games originally came out on Steam, and it followed the path that I always thought it would follow, and everybody was complaining like, "Why aren't these on console?" I was like, "I'm pretty sure they're just releasing them on PC so they can." Fix all the bugs before they throw out the console release, which
and
I
take
think
16
exactly
years
what
to add a
happened.
proper font to the game.
Yeah. But yeah, in the past year, then they released versions on the Switch and the PS5, which they have very slight differences from the PC. I really want them to bring the changes to PC, but one of them is the menus. The menus on the PC version, like, it's very small, but they have like a fade in, fade out kind of deal, which makes them just feel a little like, oh, hello cat. Which makes them just feel a little like laggy, I guess. But the console versions, they just snap. They just open, close immediately, which makes them feel very crisp and fun and just very satisfying to do the menus. So that's kind of one change that I really wish they would bring. There's other differences from console to PC, like the load times are actually a little faster. And like Ghoul had mentioned, they added a better font for the English version in the console releases. It's just it's not big things. I don't know why they're not pushing the update to PC, but I hope they do.
I just remember that, like, when I played 6 on PC, I was really excited, but the first thing I had to look up was, how do I get this font to not look like a really bad mobile port? It's such a weird thing sometimes, where it's like, you really don't, like, literally the two most common things you would see on any Twitter thing they would do are, please give us a better font option and put these on console. And both of them took, literally it felt like a year before they fixed either of them. There was a nice easy fix where you would use the Japanese font instead, and it would look great. Was the weirdest thing about it. It was like, just do this by default. But I guess the idea was that, like, they wanted it to work on mobile as well as on PC, and like that font probably scales really well to mobile phones. I guess probably what ended up happening. But you would just look at screenshots and just go, come on, guys, like you're this close, you're almost there.
Yeah.
See, I always go through that, like, why don't they just update and fix that? It's so simple. But then I remember that, like, Final Fantasy X PC still green screens because it runs out of RAM allocation. Like, and they've never fixed that. And that's something that just, like, fans and players of the games have just fixed on their own.
Yeah.
They just tend to not go back on a lot of games anyway. I know that, like, technically the best version of 12, I believe, is still the Switch version because it allows you to reset your license grid. And I don't think any other version officially lets you do that.
Really?
Like, because it came later, you can do like extra stuff on the Switch version that you can't do on other versions of it. Because it just came like a year later, and before it went to Switch, like, oh yeah, this is a nice quality of life thing we could throw in there. And they just never went back and patched any of them.
Yeah, that was the Zodiac version, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was only on the Switch.
That's wild.
It's just the ability to redo your license grid. I know that like the original PS3 and Vita versions of 10 Remaster still don't have the original soundtracks as an option. I think you still have to use the
arranged soundtrack is so gross.
but like there's little things like that just all over. That feels like something that they could have like down patched, but like they didn't ever do it for whatever reason.
It's very odd.
Games out, hands off, they're done.
Yeah, well, I will give them credit though. The one game that I personally know that they went back to was Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition, and they made that so much better. And on a release, it was awful, and it's so much better now.
They actually fixed Chrono Trigger, the PC release as well. It was atrocious when it first came out, and they cleaned it up a lot. Which it's actually playable now.
The biggest thing about the Chrono Trigger release that I think is funny is when that came out, it spiked the price of the DS version of the game. The DS game was literally like $20 on Amazon when that came out.
Yeah.
And everybody like went like, oh, they're just never releasing a good version of Chrono Trigger ever again. They bought the DS version, and the DS version is now like $100 out of nowhere.
Oh my god!
When that PC release came out, I probably could pull up my Amazon receipt at like $20, and it is now like $120 for just the cart.
That's so funny.
And it's
everybody's just like, they're never gonna fix this.
Yeah, and it makes it. Well, we were also hopeful because yes, the DS was such a good version, but it was still the DS. We wanted, a little more definitive an edition. And they somehow messed that up. But again, to their credit, and it did take them quite a long time to do it, they did eventually come back and fix it.
They do that like a decent bit, like all the Switch versions and stuff, where they have like the music glitches, where like every time you go into a combat, it would restart the music from the beginning. They fixed all of that as well. Like they tend to go back, but when they release a new version with like new fixes and new things, they have a tendency to not go back, which is a little bit frustrating for sure.
Yeah.
But like they do tend to fix like big glaring issues when they come up.
For sure.
Obviously, the Kingdom Hearts, they've done like a lot of patching on those in the past. I know, to make those run a little better on like PS4 and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I believe some of that went to the PC. I'm not sure all of it is. I'd have to check with.
I just remember when that came out on PC, like I remember it was barely playable. It just like crashed.
You had to save all the time, apparently, because it was just constantly crashing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I remember that was when those came out. I forget what year that was. I just remember like I think it was Nintendo was doing the Kingdom Hearts 4 GDQ, and he literally was like, "I'm switching the game because I can't guarantee that this won't just crash during GDQ."
I love hearing some of the stories, but like you have to have like if there's an NVIDIA update pending for your drivers, it'll crash the game, and like those ports are kind of jank personified, but there's some charm to that. We'll to put it politely.
And again, they often come back and fix some things, which we love.
But also, I will say though, since we talked about the FF10 soundtrack and whatnot, that all the Pixel Remasters have rearranged soundtracks for each of them, and they are fantastic.
They are really good.
A lot of them, like, it's probably my favorite version of Battle at the Big Bridge. FF4 Into the Giant is gorgeous. Like, there's so many redone soundtracks which just sound perfect now.
Yeah, they did. I agree. I do wish, and maybe this does exist in certain versions and I've missed it, you could still play the original soundtracks if you wanted, but the arranged ones are really quite good.
I think that feature is in only the console versions.
Okay, well, at least
I know it exists in the console version.
Okay.
So is the console version like significantly slower than the PC version, or do people run console just because of some of the quality of life stuff and just eat the time loss? What's the deal with those as far as like from a speedrunning perspective?
It's faster. It's a lot faster.
It's faster to run on console?
The PS5 can
PS5,
it loads things faster than any PC I've ever seen. So yeah, it's faster on PS5. Just like the transitions like between world map and towns and stuff, it's every one of those transitions compared to any runner on PC I've ever seen is like 0.5 to 1 second faster, which adds up a lot.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah, especially when you consider that probably goes for random encounters as well. I assume then those are going to load faster,
and
you have to run the PC version for GDQ.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have the cutscene remover and I can't throw that on a PS5. Though
that's so
I am doing FF5 for really really longathon at the end of the month, and that one I'll play on PS5. So
nice.
Do you have any issues switching back and forth? Do you use like the same controller for both to keep it, kind of simpler? Do you use I don't know, mouse and keyboard for on PC, so you just remember the muscle memory for that versus if there's any differences on PS5? How do you go back and forth between those?
It's usually pretty simple to go back and forth between them. I do use this is my saving grace is I think the DS4 is my favorite controller ever, and I modded this one to have a USB-C in it because micro USB is just garbage. So that's like my PC game controller, and then I use the DualSense for the PS5. But they're similar enough that it doesn't really make a difference. The nice thing about PC is, and I think it's for all versions of Pixel Remasters, is that they allow turbo, so it makes especially in a game like FF5 with close to 2 hours of cutscene, it's nice to fight X-Death and the Guardian Tree, and as soon as you queue up Gallus Attack, you can just turn on turbo and just walk away for 10 minutes. Go stretch your legs and almost do that's like my favorite Final Fantasy speedrunning lore was the Suteki Dane cutscene in FF10. Go take a shower.
How long is that cutscene?
Cutscene's like 12 or 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I remember it was a big joke that we did an interview during that limit break where we had the actual full version of FF10. We did an interview during that cutscene segment because there was just nothing else to do. It's like, It's like, this is going to run in the background while it's doing it. We're just going to interview the runners one by one, pull them over to the interview area, do that, and then send them off.
So good.
It also reminds me, like, when I used to run Crystal Chronicles, which was, like, my first speed run, every time you reset, there'd be a 3.5-minute cutscene. So I would, like, start the run, start playing Sound of the, or Kaze no Ne, or Sound of the Wind, and I'd go run, start doing, like, laundry. I'd have, like, 3.5 minutes to start doing that. I'm going to move my stuff from the washer to the dryer, do all this other stuff, and then come back. It's like, okay, cool. Great song. The opening cutscene of that game is fantastic, but when you've seen it a couple hundred times, you're like, okay, I get it. At this
I'm good.
point.
Yeah.
But,
And like I kind of said that when I was like, I think they're all like that, because of you kind of group them together because they're the picture masters, but like every game, is handled by its own community. So it's kind of like for a while there was like, FF4 allows turbo, but FF3 doesn't, and that was a huge crusade to kind of be like, we just allow turbo in all of them, and I think all of them now allow turbo, which is nice.
How do they compare to the original games as far as when they first came out? I don't know if you were super involved with the games as they released, but how did all the strats have to change from the original SNES versions, or maybe the GBA versions is a better match because those are more updated, maybe there's less glitching in them, or whatever the actual eventual version ended up being, or were they just no, we had to completely redo everything, throw it all out, start from scratch, and see what happens from there, or did that just depend game by game?
Yeah, it depends game by game. It's it was nice having different runners B-Dude, for example, who had run a lot of OG6, he's run a lot of OG4, and it was kind of nice to, while, in FF4, you can't enter I don't know why the name is escaping me, but you can't enter the Village of the Mist from the other side and go by dancing daggers. So it's while the route changes, it's nice to have people that know the originals to just kind of be I remember there was the time he taught me about run buffering. I had no idea what he was talking about, and then he was like, wait, have you all been doing the runs without run buffering? Yeah, and he's like, let me teach you, child.
A retro staple.
It's nice to have input from people that know the originals to be like, this is how we do that. And you're like, oh cool, I actually didn't know that. But yeah, I don't know a whole lot about a lot of the originals, but it's also varying because game to game, like you said, because when FF1 released, they had the I don't know if you ever knew about the Pixel Remaster goblin glitch or whatever, where
Yep.
essentially you could just turn everything into goblins, even chaos.
What?
You turned chaos
Yeah.
into basically 3 goblins in a trench coat. Yeah.
Yep.
What?
They patched that very quickly, but yeah, for a while there was
Yeah.
the goblin glitch.
I
That
had
sounds like a hilarious gimmick. Right?
Yeah, I had this setup explained to me at one point, but yeah, it was basically through some method which I don't remember at all. Yeah, you could change enemies into like different zone enemies, and so you basically would turn like anything into goblins, and so you could turn chaos into goblins. So which are a zone 1 enemies, so you just absolutely destroy.
That makes my 8-bit theater nerd very happy to find out that you can make goblins the final boss of Final Fantasy 1.
Right? Okay, apparently,
that's a deep cut. Do not look up the age of 8-bit theater, by the way. It will make you feel very sad.
I've aged myself in this podcast already. I don't need to feel older. Kaguya Nikki is advising us that you load the 15 puzzle into an encounter.
Oh, I've never seen that. That's funny.
Is how you used to do
really
it. Yeah.
funny. Okay, but on the flip side, though, a lot of the glitches and skips that you may remember from the originals were fixed and are not present in the Picture Master, like 64 stairs or sketch
My
glitch
favorite.
6. They made sure none of that stuff made it into the Pixel Remaster.
Which, and
For better
again,
or for worse.
they redid the background programming like completely. So that's why, again, as a casual player, a lot of it looks identical. But when you know the mechanics really well in the background and you try them in basically any of the Pixel remasters, you go, oh, that should have worked, but it didn't. And that's when you start realizing that it's the same skin, but the insides are completely different.
For sure.
It's also fascinating. I don't know if you know this, but I'm pretty sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The original FF5 version that was on PC, the one that was the iOS port, actually, if I remember correctly, had a Game Boy Advance ROM just in the background of the code, and there was like a very advanced program that would
Oh my God.
pull the data out from the ROM. It's a very fascinating version of the game.
Oh wow!
But,
I
like,
actually
literally,
didn't know
like,
anything about that.
It wasn't even like an emulator. Like it didn't know what values to use for like different enemies. So apparently it would like reach into the ROM to pull those values out and then put them into the game. It was a very strange version of the game. So even that one, like it's effectively a new version of a game that really hasn't had a new version in a long time. But
it's something I've always like. The more and more learn about different ports of Final Fantasies, it's very interesting to hear. Like, for example, when Eidos made the PC port of FF7 back in the day, I remember hearing that like they went to Square and was like, "Can we have the code?" And they were like, "We don't have that anymore. That's gone."
Well, that was
So,
in
like,
the age where everyone just threw out everything when they were done, and then you're just "But we need that," and they're like, "Well, it's too late. It's gone."
Yeah, or like I went to
so many
Distant
little
Worlds the
things.
one time, and I remember they were telling the story of like Nobuo went to recompose like Ami and Balam Garden for Distant Worlds, and Square was like, "Yeah, we don't have your sheet music anymore. That's gone." So you had to like recompose it by
oh my
ear.
god, I know that like for this is Kingdom Hearts, but Kingdom Hearts 1 in like 1.5,
Right? Yes.
that is not running on the same engine as Kingdom Hearts 1 on PS2.
No, they really had to redo it because again, they thrown it out.
They rebuilt the entire game of Kingdom Hearts 1 in the Kingdom Hearts 2 engine for 1.5.
That's wild.
That's why like lots of little things like the camera controls with the right stick and everything else. It's because it's a different game engine. They literally rebuilt Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2, which is like stuff like that is just so fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, so a lot of these, like you said, are just like complete rebuilds of games because a lot of that stuff just doesn't exist anywhere anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, that Eidos version of FF7, it was very broken anyways. It used to just crash machines. And when they did the kind of PC remaster, and they kind of, it's still, I think, somewhat based on that, which is why that version, I used to speedrun that version, the newer PC one, and it still has a lot of glitches of things being like, this shouldn't work, but it works in this PC version only.
I think all of them actually have that. I don't think they have the source. I think they had to completely redo 8 when they did 8 Remaster.
Oh yeah, that sounds about
and
right.
I know 9 is completely redone when they did that as well, which is why the PC version of that is just the iOS version. For better or worse. I
sound
love
effects
FF9.
on the 9 PC version. Oh, they're so bad.
I love FF9 so much, and it pains me that like there's another one of those games that struggles with not having a definitive like this is the version you should play, because it's like it's very hard to recommend. You should play the PS1 version with the 8-year-long loads with the start of combat, even though like, I have a lot of nostalgia for that personally, where it's like the Battle 1 theme, I swear right when that song starts dropping is when it loads in all the character models. Like it's like battlefield, zoom around a little bit, okay, now we're gonna load in like the party, then the enemy loads in, and right when it's like the music changes. I swear that was intentional. They cannot tell me it wasn't, but like
FF9 always gets that of like the slow Final Fantasy.
But it's so good. The same. I love FF.
It's something that I feel like is always an interesting thought. Like when you're learning a Final Fantasy, like I'll use the PS1 ones for example. Is it's like, well, I like the PS1 ones better, but the PC ones are faster, and it's always this like, which do I value? Time? Do I value looks?
So how did you decide to run the pixel remasters that over running like the SNES or the Game Boy? Because you said you grew up playing the Game Boy Advance versions instead. If you wanted to play your childhood version, you could play those as your speed run. What brought you to the pixel remaster?
It just kind of was something I got really hooked on whenever they came out. It was nice to play through them all, and me and my best friend were kind of just like, because it was her first time playing FF4, we played it together, and so she was like, oh, it'd be really cool if we like, learned it and ran it together and whatnot. So we kind of started working on a document of notes, and then I just kind of kept it going, and that's kind of just how it started, and then it branched out from there. Which I guess, speaking of that, if
hold up one second, Zic. I think we might be experiencing some issues.
Yeah, and we're still connected here. Oh, hey, we're online. Hi,
I think we're back.
Oh, I think we're back. Okay.
If you saw anything you didn't, it's fine. We're here.
Okay.
So I don't know where we left off.
We'll start kind of from the beginning. So I guess we'll start from the beginning. Why the pixel remasters over like your childhood versions in the PS1 or the SNES or the Game Boy Advance versions of these games?
Well, I guess I am gonna add a little nugget in there. When I first got into speedrunning back in the day, one of the games that I had two games I initially wanted to learn to speedrun.
Please don't pull a Bug's Life off this.
I can go grab it. Banjo-Kazooie and FF6 SNES.
Okay.
Neither game I actually ended up running. But so like there was a time where I was looking into the Super Nintendo version. But my best friend, me and her played through 4 Pixel Remaster at the release, and she was like, "Oh, it'd be really cool if we ran these together." And we started a little, set of notes and whatnot. And I just kind of kept it going, and that's kind of how it began. Which I was going to add on to that. Speaking of which, like, that notes document that I made, I have that public on speedrun.com now. So anybody ever wanting to learn Final Fantasy IV, those notes are out there. They're pretty good, mainly because I have had a few people learn off those notes and have sent me all the mistakes in them. So now I know, like, I have killed a few people's runs, and now those mistakes are fixed.
I love that. Listen, if you can't occasionally just kill someone else's run, what's the point?
Oh yeah, no, I can think of plenty of times where I would do notes for my stuff and I'd have them public, and especially for like some stuff that like I would just know it's like, do the strap for the boss. And people are like, what is the strap for the boss? Like, what does that
mean? What that means? Yeah.
Well, for me as well, is it's like I've been around FF4 Pixel Remaster since like, the start. So sometimes the various routes and stuff get a little mixed in my head. And sometimes I just like, like we used to grab the light sword in the sealed cave. And then we stopped doing that after the last update. But like, it was still in my notes, but in my brain, I was like, oh yeah, we don't grab that anymore. And then people are like, what do we do with this light sword? I'm like,
oh no,
dude, let me get that out of there. And it's just like, my notes, I always say, my notes are for me, and I make assumptions sometimes. But when I make them public, I'm like, oh yeah, you probably wouldn't get that.
Hey, there's nothing like folks trying to use your notes to give you kind of a free check. A free, like, what works? What's right here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's, like I said, if anybody's ever interested in the Pixel Remasters, I know, Nikki has a great set of notes out there for Final Fantasy 3. Wody B has a fantastic guide for Final Fantasy 5. I mean, it's really good. He's got maps with all the items labeled and arrows. Like, you don't even need to do a casual playthrough of that game. Wody's guide will get it's as close to the FF10 guide as possible. The FF10 guide I love. It's just like start from the top, go to the bottom. You don't even need to know the game. And then I know B Dude has a nice up-to-date set of notes for FF6. So a lot of people have put a lot of work into getting resources out there to make them pretty easy to get into.
And these are like really beloved games, so it is fantastic that the community is so welcoming and so good at, trying to help onboard people into learning how to do these runs, because they are, I mean, they're huge games. They're so complicated. And something we talk about Final Fantasy 5. How many jobs total are there in FF5 in Pixel Remaster specifically? Because I know that like even the Pixel Remaster is missing like
lot.
I want to say like Beastmaster and another one like they were like exclusive to the GBA version that didn't come with it. But like, there's still probably like 24 to 30 jobs in that game, if not more.
There's rows and rows of them.
So it's like, how do you? I was like, it's so fascinating to hear, like, how do you know what jobs are even good?
Yeah, and it does make you, sit down sometimes and be like, it's tough to say that like a route. I think actually, so I'll finish that thought. But it's tough to say sometimes that it's like a route is definitive when there's 24, 30 jobs. You're like, any combination of these could do something no one's thought of yet. It's just kind of wild.
Yeah.
But I was going to piggyback off that and talk about there is a Japanese runner. If anybody's ever looked at the Pixel Master speedrunning, or you look at the boards, there's a Japanese runner by the name of Shigeru. He has the world record on every Pixel Remaster. He recently just did like a reroute of the FF5 route, and I've been slowly trying to make notes off of it. But as I think Wody said to me one day, he's like, I don't have the time to translate the whole run from Japanese to English. So it's a slow process, but I'm trying to get that reroute into notes.
Yeah. Speaking of notes, though, I know you probably can't speak for all the communities, but if folks are looking for notes on like these notes you're referencing, generally speaking, is there a good place to get them? Speedrun.com, other repositories?
I know that my FF4 guide is on speedrun.com. I'm pretty sure the 5 and 6 notes are like pinned in the Final Fantasy speedrunning Discord. So I think a lot of them are in their own respective Discords. I'm not sure about the others, though, and where they're at. But they are out there in public.
Okay.
Puexel's actually got a pretty good question in chat. Puexel obviously knows his Final Fantasy pretty well, we could say.
Puexel? No.
I don't want to get fired from my boss here, so. But no, I mean, there's another difference that like is very prominent versus the original versions is the original versions are very heavily what's step rooted, where it's like if you take this many steps in this area, you'll get an encounter on this step every time, and then you'll do all this other stuff. Which how do you feel about that? Is that something? Obviously, it doesn't exist in the Pixel remasters. Is that a good thing in your opinion? Is it just different? Like, it just makes it a different type of run?
Yeah, it definitely just is a little different, relying on the RNG. But a lot of the time, Nikki's kind of saying it in chat, is that it's kind of accounted for on the route. There's a lot of like, when you're going from after Siren in the ship graveyard to the mountain, it's like you want to get an encounter with like 2 Tatals to get your levels set for Goblin Punch. But they're like, if you don't get that encounter, you can kill rock slugs on the mountains. So there's a lot of like backup stuff where it's nothing is really going to cripple you. There's only a few times, like I learned a little while back that Excess Castle, I believe it was Excess Castle, there's like 1 or 2 encounters that are unrunnable. I didn't know that, and if it's unrunnable, because in that game, if you're the thief job, you can learn the ability Scram, which is just an instant runaway. But I remember I was just like brainlessly running through Excess Castle, and I get an encounter, and then I just saw a miss on Bart's, and it just took me like 5-10 seconds. I was like, Scram can miss? What is going on? And then we looked up, they're like, that's an unrunnable encounter.
Oh no. Yeah.
But my first thing I thought would be like, oh, somehow we have a Gen 1 miss like in Pokemon. It's like a 1 in 256 of like just failing everything no matter what.
Well, that's what I thought. I was like, does this really have an accuracy on it?
Oh no.
So every now and then, Exet's Castle is usually the big part in 5 that's like, without a step route, you're just like, yeah, you can just get kind of screwed up sometimes. Those encounters are, 3 blue dragons AoE. You're like, oh, okay, yep. That is where the autosave kind of helps you.
Right, yeah, because anytime you enter a new room, it autosaves for you, right? Where if you die, it'll pull you back.
Yeah.
So that's definitely nice for sure.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that the console versions have, which is also nice, talking about that autosave, is you can, in battles, you can press start and there's a return to title screen now. Whereas in the PC version, the start is just a pause. So it's like, oh, I messed up the strat. I just got to sit here and wait till the boss kills me to reload or something. So
you can just
Whereas in console, you could just hit start, go to title, and then reload and do it again.
That's so nice.
Yeah. Which I think people really liked for like FF1 and the Chaos Casino.
Oh my god, the Chaos Casino.
So I guess another question, how do you prepare for a big run like a GDQ run? We have our own limit break stuff, but GDQ is a very different audience. You're not necessarily communicating with a bunch of RPG nerds like you would be on the limit break channel. Everybody in the limit break channel, is going to be a big Final Fantasy nerd. They're all going to have played all the Final Fantasy games to completion. Yep. They're going to own all the merch from the Square Enix stores. Shipping be damned. But how do you, when you're competing with, talking to a general audience that maybe doesn't have a lot of familiarity with, Final Fantasy V especially is a game that really struggled to find an audience in the, the Western markets because it's here until so much later. How do you communicate that for a new audience?
Yeah, it's definitely tough. And what's going to make it a little more difficult too is because it's the cutscene removed version. Like the game just moves, like you just 1, 2, 3, next. So, really gonna have to prioritize not getting, too deep into the roots of FF5, but at the same time, it's really going to be leaning a lot on my co-commentators, which are going to be Foxy Jira and Wody B. They're going to be the backbone of helping me through that. I just got to figure out my best way of having my notes, because that's something that definitely going to. There's some FF5 menus that I just, when I did FF4 at the last GDQ, I did almost that whole game without my notes. A lot of but FF5's menus are just a whole different beast on their own because you're changing jobs like every screen.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's always funny because like some people can memorize their notes, and other, depends on the game as well, depending on how complicated they are and how much you do. That's not the only run you're doing at GDQ, if I remember correctly, right? You're gonna go grab it for us? There we go.
I got it right here. Stay tuned for A Bug's Life on the PS1. So yes, I'll be running A Bug's Life also at AGDQ. It's one of my favorite speed runs ever. It's weirdly, when they accepted, I've been spinning this game for years, and then when they accepted it, I was like, oh shoot, well, I didn't think I'd get this far. What do I do now?
so what is this like weird PS1 Disney 3D? It's a platformer, right?
Oh yeah, it's a pretty bad platform.
I love it.
It's a special game. I'll just say it's a special game. It's actually, like I always tell people, it's casually not very good. Speedrun, it's actually pretty fantastic. When I was a young lad, I was always on PS1s. So like I said, that's how FF4, my first version, was the PS1 version. The 7, 8, 9 Final Fantasies. So I grew up with PS1, PS2. So those games are just very nostalgic to me. And so that's why I have 1, 2, 3, 5 different versions of FF7 now.
Nice.
Because, it's like good. I first got kind of hooked on finding like misprint copies of FF7, which there's a lot of because the print runs for that game are kind of all over the place.
What do you mean by misprint? Like, do you have an example?
Yeah, so let me see. What do I have? Is this the one that's obvious? Yes. So like here's one I have here. It's called the double Sephiroth copy. So normally the insert of FF7, the first page is Aerith to match the instruction booklet, and the back panel is Sephiroth. They had some printings where they printed Sephiroth on both card inserts.
I know people who would pay some money for that version.
Yeah, and so there was one that like the text on the back had a misprint. There's one I have back here where on the discs, like behind the disc number, there's like an image, and disc 1 is the Highwind, disc 2 disc 1's a Chocobo, disc 2 is the Highwind, and disc 3 is Meteor. Mm-hmm. But there's a version where the Meteor is on disc 2 and 3 instead of the Highwind.
Oh my God.
So there's all sorts
check
of
my
weird
disc
versions.
a little bit here and see which versions I've got.
Yeah, right?
Especially because like I got into like talking personally, I didn't get into Final Fantasy VII until after I played Final Fantasy VIII. Was my first Final Fantasy actually.
Yeah.
So I might actually
Okay.
have to go check that.
And then it kind of evolved from there to finding out. I don't know if either of you heard that, like very recently, it was like 2 months ago, they discovered that certain like serial printings of FF7 are faster than the rest.
No.
What?
Yes. There's an Excel document out there. I think it's in the FF7 Discord that lists all the serial numbers, and certain ones are like somebody showed me like a side by side of them loading. And it's like half a second on each like map transition. So you have to look at the code on the inner ring of the disc and see which one are fastest.
No shot.
Yep. So I have one
God.
copy that has a fast disc 1. And, oh, it's something.
Oh, is it just disc 1 or is it all 3 discs? Like you have to find individual different discs for every.
Yes, it is all 3 discs. Because like the one I bought at a game store, because I saw the disc 1 was fast, and I was like, nice, I got it. And then my friend, an FF7 runner, Dill Wingo, he was like, that's just a disc 1. Your 2 and 3 are normal. You have to find a fast 2 and 3. I was like, what a mess.
Okay, now when you say faster, how much faster is the run if you're using the fast discs versus the non-fast discs?
I don't know in total, but like I said, on screen transitions, it's about like half a second. It's noticeable. So half a second per screen transition.
Lot of time.
It adds up. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that's like a new FF7 speedrunning discovery.
And apparently, if it's not all like you just buy one copy and you're good.
Right. It's not just like a buy one copy and you're good. Yep.
You could get that lucky, but that seems like very rare.
Right. Yep.
Oh my god.
That's up there with like the. I know every FF9 runner has literally like 12 copies of FF9 because the discs keep failing on them.
Yeah.
This is like somehow even worse.
Here, I have posted in the chat. I have the link to the document if anybody's curious. This is how deep people get into speedrunning.
They've
separated it by every serial number. And which ones work and don't work. Yeah, it's a lot. But it's always impressive being like, wow.
How do you? This is one of the things. Like, how do you even find this? Is like
right, exactly.
Like, how do you isolate that from the fact there are like 5 different PS2 models that are all different, have different load speeds, and like isolating all of this must have been a nightmare.
Yeah, it's right. PlayStation speedrunning is a mess sometimes.
And then like to also know that they probably have to like. I wonder what the actual reason is. If it's serial number based, is it a printing thing?
Right.
Is there some like code thing where it's like,
oh no,
actually, if it's got this code, like just something in the system clicks faster. Like, did a ray of sunshine hit the disc printer on a specific day when they were printing discs?
Right.
Oh
what?
Yeah, it's so odd.
That is amazing.
But yeah, you also talked about one of my favorite pieces of lore is that I remember. Even if it was like jokingly, FF9 runners would like have like 3 runs where just like they'd get bad RNG and they'd be like, yeah, this copy sucks. I'm going to go buy a new copy. They'd be like, that one's cursed.
So one of the funny things about FF9 as well, you can still buy new copies of FF9 straight from Square Enix, I think.
No, actually.
Oh, do they finally sell out?
They pulled it a couple months back, which I know. I'll never forget like the one tweet I saw from Mutsky. He just like pulls out a bubble mailer and pours out like 6 copies onto his bed. But yeah, people are suspecting because they pulled. You used to be able to buy Chrono Cross copies on the Square Enix store, and they pulled that before they announced the remake of Chrono Cross. So they're thinking they randomly pulled FF9 a month or 2 back. So people are kind of like, I was sign the remake's coming.
I was so certain we were going to get news as soon as the Ever Crisis stuff hit. And like now they're doing an FF9 collab in War of the Visions.
Right.
Like,
yep.
I'm like, well, there's no time to announce it now. So it's like, what is going on? But yeah, as soon as that was like, oh yeah, Game Awards, we'll probably hear some kind of FF9 news. There was like the news like way back when where it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this like animated FF9 series. Like, you're doing a what? Like FF9? Like of all the Final Fantasies? You know, like, don't get me wrong, I love FF9. It seems like it's a very special game in a lot of people's hearts, you know, for very similar reasons. You know, you said it's your favorite. It's, you know, one of my 2 favorite Final Fantasies and everything else. As much as I hate Zidane now, thanks to the TCG. But it's like FF9. That's the one y'all got the French animation to come. Like you didn't do like 10, like 7, even like I don't know, 12, 13. You know, the ones like you're like more recent. 9.
I don't know. It's just, it's again surprising because Square does love their FF7.
You know, I can even see like 11 because, like, you know, from what I can tell, FF11 has like a fantastic story that's like very difficult to experience now. I've been convinced like FF11 was going to come to like Switch like a gazillion times by now because they had like the mobile port of FF11. But
sadly, 11's like the one game I don't know a ton about. I never played it online. I really would love to just like. I really should just sit down and just like watch through just like the story. It's kind of how like. I always tell people, even if you're not an MMORPG fan, I think like it's worth watching through the story of FF14 because it really is just like a really amazing story for a Final Fantasy.
So good.
It's definitely a weird one because it's also like it is a very slow burn. Like that's part of what makes it really good too. Is that like you have so much connection to the characters by the time stuff actually does start happening. So there's definitely a give and take to it, but you can tell they kind of got their footing as things went along with FF14. I guess real quick so that the chat can know, if you guys have any questions for Zic, or if there's any, you know, fun questions or things you want, you know, Zic to talk about, feel free to throw them in there. We'll get to those later. But while we're talking about Final Fantasy in general, I'm going to be a fun little shill. We're going to talk some trading card game stuff.
There's a trading card game?
So if anybody that doesn't know, Final Fantasy has a trading card game. I know Zic is pretty big into it as well as myself. How are you enjoying the new set so far?
I'm still hit or miss on it. It feels like a very fast format right now. My friend at Locals just keeps saying backups aren't needed anymore. Like
one of the decks at Worlds was on just 3, which is
it's ridiculous.
There's a certain terrifying energy to seeing 47 forwards and 3 backups in a deck going, no, what have we done?
But yeah, I've been playing Final Fantasy TCG since almost when it came out. My first event was the Opus 4 pre-release. So a good friend of my Locals has played since the game came out. So I've been pretty as close to the beginning as I could get. But yeah, I have like a friend at Locals. He's been playing since the start. He went to like Opus 3 Nationals where he was like, it was all just mono water Cagnazzo. Like it's a different time back then. But I'm
glad to see that NA has not changed apparently if they're still playing mono water back then. Like NA loves mono water more than any deck. I do not understand that at all.
Yep. But yeah, I've just, like I said, I've been a massive Final Fantasy nerd my entire life. And as soon as I saw the trading card game, I pulled one of my old Yu-Gi-Oh buddies. I was like, I bought starter decks. Learn this game with me.
We're playing this now.
And you know, I got hooked into it. He was like, it's all right. I'll have a deck. And now it's like he went to Nationals and it's like his number 1 card game. And it's a fantastic card game. I highly recommend
really
it to anybody.
Yeah. So, it is also just fun playing with all the characters and stuff, you know.
Oh, yeah. And
obviously, like if you're an FF5 player because of the speedrun, Ferris is super meta right now. Thanks to the Warrior of Light stuff showing up. FF4 has so many good cards in it right as well. They just like keep pushing those games. You could play decks that are like, I think Ice Lightning right now has like 38 FF7 characters in it, which is hilarious.
And
what decks
FF8
do you
kinda
both
coming in.
currently play?
Sorry?
I said, what decks do you both currently play?
I play just about everything.
But I mean, what do you particularly enjoy?
My two pet decks, my three pet decks I play are Rainbow Rydia, where you play 4 colors with Rydia as an engine, to win the game when you hit the right draws. There's a 4-color Warrior of Light that has the coolest original art for the game. He's got his sword this, his one eye's blocked. He's looks totally awesome.
Yeah,
the card is completely busted in every way. It's so fun. I play Mono Lightning Scions with Chaos Arc. It was a pet deck that I figured out in time for Nationals. That deck is super cool. You're kind of using Scions as advantage engine, and then you just slap down Chaos to steal your opponent's forwards, and then make them discard their entire hand with Arcs as a summon. Which super super cool deck. And then the other deck that I'll play is Mono Wind, which is this total Yu-Gi-Oh deck where you just try to cast 8 million cards in a turn and then win by doing that. But I the cool thing about the game is it's relatively inexpensive, so you can buy 3 boxes and have just about a play set of everything. So I spend a little bit every now and then get that, and then I have to pick up a couple of harder, more expensive cards every now and then. But I generally have, I can play any deck in the game I want to for the most part, which is a super awesome feeling that I never had when I played a game like Yu-Gi-Oh. I know Zic is a big Final Fantasy IV enthusiast. Every time you message me with a deck, it's always some variant of here's all the Final Fantasy IV characters, wrapped in a Cecil package.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you said pet decks, I was like, yeah, Ghoul knows that my deck I'm always swearing by is an FF4 crystal deck, which has gotten even better this set with they printed an Ursula that can generate crystals, which is cool. And yeah, so I will always try and push that. I feel like crystals are so close to hitting critical mass with Cyan and whatnot.
Oh my god, Cyan is so crazy.
It's really one of the cool things about the game is they try very hard to stylize a lot of the cards based around their character or their lore or whatnot. You'll have Minfilia that can search a Scion of the Seventh Dawn. You'll have Louis Soir who can search Alisair Alphino. You have
my favorite lore. Two of my favorite lore cards like that are Magissa, where when she gets to half health, she can summon her husband out of the deck.
Oh, that's so good.
And the other one is Emmett Selk, where anytime he's chosen, he blinks out of the game until the end of the turn. So anytime you're about to nail him down, he disappears.
He just goes to the void.
Bye. Nap time.
He's yeah, peace out, I'm gone. Yep. And then when you're about to lose, whenever he comes back, he starts doing stuff when his plan is almost complete, because the game is almost over. He gets to start doing things. One of the coolest flavor cards, for an FF 14 fan. I love it.
Rydia is always a card that has something to do with summons, and that's one of the cool things is how much care goes into the franchise in general through the cards.
You learn to hate Zidane over the course of the game. Is about the only downside, because
Zidane steals cards.
Every single Zidane is just comically broken.
I love that. I was just kept thinking, why do you keep mentioning hating Zidane? But yeah, that would do it.
No, he steals cards from your hand. He steals cards from your deck. He attacks you and burns your stuff.
As someone though who is a big fan of Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy lore, there are 2 cards that drive me insane. One, there's a new Tifa card. The art is her in her cowboy outfit, and they gave her job Avalanche Operator. And I'm like, she is a child. She is a tour guide or something. She's not an Avalanche Operator.
Do you know the lore on that one and how that happened, by the way?
No.
So they designed cards around the theme. Okay, we knew we were making a Tifa, we knew we were making an Avalanche Operative support, and they matched the art to it later. And that was art that was at one point considered for being an alternate costume for 7 Remake, which is why it has the 7 Remake tag in the bottom where the game's from. That was going to be an alt costume for 7 Remake that never made it into the final game.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
But they said we have this really cool piece of art that we want to use, and this doesn't match perfectly with the lore of the game that it's Cowgirl Tifa. But we want it to be Avalanche support, and the art's great, so we use that. So that's the lore behind that, is that they design cards around a name and what they're doing before they actually match the art to it.
That's fair. I was going to say the other one for me, that one I'll forgive now. The other one for me is there's a Fang from FF13, and she is a thief. And I'm like, when was Fang a thief? Like, she's not a lessee, she's not a commando, she's a thief.
That's Lightning Returns, I believe, is the character art for
I
that
guess.
one.
Yeah, I guess so.
Sorry, what game? I didn't hear you because there's only 2 Final Fantasy. Anyways, gotta go.
Yeah, I think that's technically like Lightning Returns lore, probably. I don't know. I don't know. I never got too deep into the 13 lore, but
yeah, I remember playing Lightning Returns when it came out. I haven't played it since.
Was she a thief in Lightning Returns?
She was in the desert. That's all I remember.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because she wasn't with Vanille, was she?
Right.
Yeah, there's.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's definitely a weird one because like Lassie actually has a little bit of support and would actually be better for the game if she was Lassie because then Shadow Lord could kill her. But the fact that she was a thief was honestly better for the card than it wasn't, unfortunately.
Yep. But I will keep awaiting my Tantalus members.
I just want a Tataru card.
Oh my!
We're 21 sets in.
Tataru card?
I'm like, wait, we have one.
There's no Tataru.
Card.
No,
there's a Scions of the Seventh Dawn. There's no Tataru.
Oh my god.
What?
Oh my god, there isn't.
I'm waiting for it.
Like Kryl. Oh wow, you're right.
Yeah, no, there's no Tataru. And the funny thing is that like the FF14 devs love Tataru. She's got like literally like 8
everyone loves
outfits in that game. Like,
yeah,
she's amazing.
Yeah, no, there's no Tataru. I keep waiting for
6 different Kryls.
Or I'm hoping one day we get from FF9 Zenero, Benero, Gennaro, Dinero, Pinero, Benera, Zenera, Genera, Dinera. If you know the Nero Brothers side quest.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
That was always a funny piece of FF9 thing where they're like, I think it was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago or something. Like people were like, they discovered the whole entirety of the Nero Brothers side quest where you have to go back to Lindblom basically like every boss of the game to advance it.
Oh my god.
That is amazing. Okay, you heard it here first. Square Enix devs, whoever's working on the card game, we need Tataru's stat and all of the folks in that chain. But especially Tataru, please. We're begging.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Yeah, especially considering how many Scions there are. There's like 15 different Ishtolas at this point.
Exactly, and you know, everyone loves Tataru, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
They should.
It should be exciting when that ends up actually coming out. So I don't know. I could talk about the TCG for literal hours, and I have. So, but yeah, always fun to bring it up with fellow enthusiasts. We actually played it at SGDQ when I was there, and you were there as well. We brought our decks and played some, and I got the W there, even though you tried to beat me in with the FF6 characters at the time. A little ahead of your time there with the FF6. Now that I think about it, that was one set before that deck became really, really good.
Yeah, I always put the offer on every GDQ. I always bring my Final Fantasy cards and whatnot. I always am like, anybody ever wants to learn? Like, I am more than happy to teach people the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about the card game, and I think it extends to the Final Fantasy like community in general, is it's a very kind, welcoming community. For a card game, it is the nicest community I have ever. People will bend over backwards to give you cards or help you learn and all these sorts of things.
People in the community are just happy to see how the people that want to play the game for the card game.
I know for our locals, like, you know, we'll see somebody like, oh, I would like to get into the game and just don't have any cards. And I was like, I promise you, just come to locals and people will unload you.
You're like, you're about to get some cards. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you could see it on camera, but I've like a wall of cards back here that I haven't sorted and everything else. There's more on the floor next to me, and it's a big mess. But yeah,
love that.
The classic card game problem.
Mm-hmm. It's not a problem; it's a solution.
That's one way of thinking about it. Oh man, so no.
Yeah, both of you, either of you played through Final Fantasy 16? I haven't gotten to visit the DLC they released.
I'm playing it literally right now.
I
played it when it first came out, and I just picked it up again. I'm not even halfway through, so.
Started it, had to take a break, was going to start it up again over the winter break, and my PS5, when I came back from visiting my girlfriend in Australia, my PS5 disk drive broke, so I had to go send it off to the shop to get fixed.
Oh,
But yeah,
no.
I literally just played like 5 hours last night.
So my PS5 is literally in the shop right now. My warranty had expired too, so I had to figure out go through Sony or do I go through like an actual. There's a local game shop near here that is awesome. If you're ever in DFW, FX Game Exchange actually fixed one PS2 at one point and a bunch of other stuff. They're awesome. They're like super cool. Go check them out. But so I had to bring it over there. But they're on like a 2-week backload because one of their like tools is actually broken. So they're like having half their output of like console repairs. And
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I've known the HDMI ports to go bad in PS5s. I hadn't heard a lot of disk drives.
Apparently, it's a pretty common issue to have happen. Like everything else on the console works. I could run digital only games, and then I get home. My little sister's in town. We have a tradition of like playing through Resident Evils or whatever. So I picked up the new Resident Evil 4 remake. I'm sitting down, about to play it. I'm like, disc not loading. Did I put the PS5 has the weird thing where the disc goes in backwards too. Like, that threw me off the first time I got a disc for it because and then I'm like, oh, that can't be right. Pop it out, pop it back in. It's not loading. And the weird thing is, I barely used the disc drive on this thing. Like, it's not a thing I used a lot. I think I've literally only played a couple games in full off of a disc, and so apparently it's a pretty common issue. So
yeah, that makes sense.
You had me scared. My disc drive's going to die one of these days.
Yeah, right.
I can add it to the graveyard of consoles I have. I've got a backwards compatible PS3 in my basement. I need fixed.
Oh no.
Yeah,
and I have a PS2 I need fixed too.
Oh no. So you were bringing up Final Fantasy 16. Is that in relation to the trading card game, or was it
I hope so.
Okay.
Everybody's really excited. They just got around to Strangers of Paradise. I've got like the Jack Garland sleeves right here that are so good.
Jack Garland, yep.
But they just got around to Stranger of Paradise, so we'll probably get. Last set they got all the Endwalker stuff in, so it's about a year and a half lead time before they usually get it. It's probably like the end of next year we'll have our first 16 cards.
Yeah, that was just a game that I know life that when it came out, I just started it on release and played it till it was done, and it quickly became one of my favorite Final Fantasies.
I started that, but it was also in the middle of summer, and I had it upstairs in my bedroom. And so it was just heating up my bedroom. I was like, it's already too warm. I cannot play this. So now it's basically winter. So I'm back to it.
Yeah, I need to get back to finishing that. I also need to I really want to replay 7 Remake before Rebirth comes out. So I want to do that. Especially some future podcast lore for people in the chat. Don't tell anybody. But we're planning on probably having a lore discussion on FF7. We talk about cool things on this channel that aren't necessarily speedrunning related. So my boss in Heroic Spirit Gamer wants to have a lore discussion on FF7. So it's going to be me, him, and some other fun people. And we're going to be talking about just like all the FF7 lore, trying to break it down, kind of our wants and hopes and everything else. Just we'll have a giant spoiler tag on the stream, and we'll probably go for 3 to 4 hours. I'm not even joking. We've unintentionally just been in calls talking about the like Rebirth stuff and gone for 2 hours just about random stuff.
You can just go off about it. There's so much.
Oh yeah, when you start getting into the 7 universe and lore, it's infinite, truly.
Yeah, so I need to play through that. I need to actually I never played through Dirge, and I know it's not good.
But
me either, and I have a copy of it.
I picked up a copy of it at a local game store. I haven't heard good things about it, but
I've heard it's atrocious. People tell me don't even try, but I'm like, I have to.
Yeah,
it's Vincent, I have to play it.
I love the Maximilian dude's quote on it. It's one of my favorite quotes. It made me forget that I liked Final Fantasy VII at all.
That's really funny.
So that's a little scary. But...
I love that so much.
Yep. It's the one PS2 game you can play with a mouse and keyboard.
Wait, really?
Yes, you can plug a mouse and keyboard into your PS2.
Oh my god, why?
Well, now I have to play it like that.
Right.
Go to Limit Break with the mouse and keyboard and speedrun it. Oh no. Because that would almost definitely be optimal for a third-person shooter. You could be able to turn faster, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, no.
Are you telling me it is better with mouse? And chat's telling us it's actually better with mouse.
No, don't drop this lore on me now.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Guess who's all setting up their PS2s after the stream?
I know. No, I haven't played through Crisis Core ever. I need to do that before.
Oh really? Okay.
That one's really good. I
bought it. Guess what I bought it on? I bought a disc copy for PS5.
Oh, no. I had the disc for PSP and I finished it and then promptly lost the disc. So I just have the case for it. So I'm like, I really should rebuy it as the remake. But
yeah, the remake was really good.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard they fixed a lot of things in it, a lot of quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I need to play through that at some point. Like I said, I want to redo remake before Rebirth and a lot of other stuff. So
yes,
a lot of Final Fantasy in my future. Would not even talking just the card game, which I spent so much time doing the card game and everything else. So while you're doing your AGDQ run, I'm going to be at the Winter Cup getting myself one of those nice shiny full art garnets.
Yeah, I won't. Sad. But I'm excited for it. It's I was saying it last time, but like it's a really like coming full circle moment for me because first off, the first run when I was introduced to speedrunning, the first run I ever saw was Spike and Poexel doing the co-op FF9 run back at like what was that, like AGDQ 2013 or something? That was like my first speed run I ever saw, and then it was always like I gotta watch Final Fantasy runs. Now that I knew it was a thing, my first in-person GDQ was AGDQ 2016, where the finale was Final Fantasy IV, and like I was in the front row. You could see me in the VOD on YouTube, and it was just kind of like going from, you know, because I remember AGDQ 16. One of my good friends was like, "You want to go to GDQ?" And I was like, "You can go. Like that's something I can do." Like I thought it was this like secret invite only, and so it was cool to go, but then also to be like, I never would have even thought back then that like, oh, I'm watching the finale FF4, to today being like, oh, I am the finale for
I'm the finale. It's me.
Game. Like it's just this cool moment where it's like the Final Fantasy speedruns have always been a big part of the last 10 years of life, and it's cool to kind of get to represent it on the main stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's super exciting.
Perfect. Well, is there anything else you want to kind of let us know or share with us? Any last chat questions before we kind of clue it up here?
I figure I'll just close it off by saying thank you for having me on, and that I will be doing Final Fantasy V for the last day of really longathon at the end of the month, and then that's on the 31st, and then of course I'll be doing Final Fantasy V as the finale for AGDQ this year with a naming incentive. So please, when that opens, if you're watching GDQ, please put all your money towards the name Chadley for our protagonist.
Are you going to discard a card to go search a lightning summon, or are you going to add characters back from your break zone to your hand? That's the real question.
That is the question. It's a funny meme. Me and my best friend Foxy kind of before FF7 Remake came out, he was doing a Nuzlocke run of Pokemon, and his thing was like, oh, every Pokemon we're gonna make it like something Lee. So like I was like a Wooper named Zic3, whatnot. And he named the rival Chadley out of it. And then Remake came out and they had a Chadley character. Like we like lost our minds. Like there's no way. And so now we just name the main character Chadley in every game we play.
Oh my god.
Foxy deliberately loses 10 to 15 seconds on every FF10 run he does to rename Titus Chadley.
Poexel has a question. If the console pixel remaster stuff gets ported back to PC, will that make the PC just the de facto best version of speedrun?
I would say yes. Again, the one thing is I don't think a turbo controller exists for the PS5. So
I'm sure they do. The question is if there's a good one and not the one that you would give your little brother when you're about to play whatever the PS5 equivalent of Mario Party is.
Yeah.
True.
You know?
Yeah. But that's the one thing that I like. If the PC version was the same speed, I would run solely because it's nice to have. I will always be, especially for longer RPG runs, a supporter of having turbo. Just to be able to not only ease your hands, but to take breaks, because breaks in long runs are great. So yeah, I would definitely go that route for that reason. I don't know. I'll have to look.
Speedruns, protect your wrists. Protect your hands. Yep. You're going to need them if you want to keep speedrunning.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look because Foxy bought like the DualSense Edge at one point because he thought like you could do turbo with it, and you can't, sadly. So
I'm sure
Probably has to be
there's
some
some
weird
third-party
third-party thing.
controller, like
yeah.
especially like probably for like I would imagine you probably want to look at like the FPS controllers. I imagine that those
Mhm.
would be the ones to look
Mhm.
for.
Mhm.
I guess like real quick, do you have like a 2 to 3 minute, like what's your best way to approach a new speed run? Like new game, you're super excited to have played it, you want to speed run it now or want to look at the speed run, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I mean, first off, of course, I think your first best bet is to see if there's any resources out there, see if there's a guide on speedrun.com or a video on YouTube or anything like that. I've learned an infinite amount of games. I think one of the important things I always, so the two kind of important things I always kind of talk to people about is like, one, a speed run in its general sense is just getting from the start of the game to the end of the game as fast as you can. Your second playthrough of a game is a speed run. It's like, so don't get too caught up in trying to learn all the crazy strats, all the world record things, all this. Like at the end of the day, just getting from start to end is a great place to just start. And then you can kind of piece in the stuff later. The other thing I like to do also is say like, whenever I'm learning a run or practicing a run, sometimes I'll watch the world record run, but sometimes it's also best like go grab like 20th place or something, because I bet they'll be doing a lot more like safety strats or backup strats than the crazy stuff that like a world record run.
That's really smart.
Yeah. So
I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely correct.
I've found a lot of interesting things buried in, I forget. I want to say it was for FF4 or something. I can't remember now, but I always seem to just like watch second place and be like, oh my God, that's so much better. Why am I doing it the way I am?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. That I'd never even considered. It's like if you're learning a new game, to jump into some of the older ones. But that's definitely fantastic. Yeah, usually it sounds like looking for those resources, whether it's on Discord, speedrun.com, going into a runner stream, seeing if you have questions for them. Usually people tend to be pretty good about helping out if you ask.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I could count on like one hand the number of people that have been even slightly timid about sharing the communities. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Zic, thank you so much for coming on. You've been a fantastic guest.
Yeah.
Netara, thanks as always for helping co-host.
Of course.
One last bit of housekeeping. The Limit Breaks podcast is going to go on a slight break, for the holiday, for the new year and everything else. We'll be back in January with someone. I have not lined up a guest for the show quite yet.
No, it's lined up. It's a big secret.
In the meantime, definitely make sure you tune in for Zic's AGDQ runs, plural. You have the times for those for us real quick, Zic?
I know Bug's Life will be on Monday the 15th, I believe at like 7 a.m. Eastern. And FF5 is the finale, which is Sunday the 20th, or technically it's Saturday the 20th at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Literally during the Winter Cup, fun. So definitely tune in for those. Support RPG speedrunning as a whole. It's always fantastic to see this show up in GDQ, and Zic is going to absolutely kill it, be a fantastic representative for the community, I'm sure. So
cannot wait to see the runs.
We'll be back in January. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye everybody.